Hi, I'm Jane Farnham from Great British Talent, and welcome to our series of podcasts where you get to meet all our amazing, talented speakers who are available for your corporate events. Essentially, it's an opportunity to find out more about what they talk about and how they can help add value to your business. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce HR, leadership, and technology expert, Elizabeth Cowper. So tell me a little bit about your speaking career. How long have you been speaking?
Well, I've been speaking more publicly a lot in the last 4 to 5 years, but in-house, when I was in an in-house HR career, I stood up at every monthly town hall. So getting me in front of the room wasn't a difficult thing to do. And I thoroughly enjoyed it, which I think has kind of paved the way for where I've gone on to doing more speaking since I left the corporate world and set up my own company.
Yeah, so you set up Ludo. So talk to me just briefly then, a little bit about your background leading up to Ludo.
Yeah, of course. So my career has been 25 years in corporate HR, came out of university, initially worked in recruitment. That was back in the days when recruitment was flying and I had a priority to pay off student debts. That was kind of my motivation. And then ended up in HR and worked my way up in my career and absolutely loved it. I found my jam. It was my thing and I really loved it. And I had a very generalist HR career, primarily working for high-end luxury brands. I've been very lucky to work for LVMH, Harvey Nichols, Planet Organic, and then my last corporate role with Tapestry, who own Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman. And I had a very generalist role, as I said, but I really honed in more and more and more in the back end of my career around inclusion, well-being, and really driving cultures that thrive for the business, of course, but also for the individual working in that organization.
So that vast amount of experience then and leading into a more, I suppose, holistic space of well-being led you to create Ludo. So tell me in a nutshell, what is Ludo?
So Ludo, my company, is a business that's all about changing the landscape of the workplace for tomorrow. We exist in a world where sadly, not everybody feels included, valued, that they have equitable opportunity in the workplace. And I want that to change. And my experience in my last corporate role, I was global head of wellbeing on the global DEI committee. And this intersection between wellbeing and inclusion is so valuable that we can value every single person, every talent in our business to be truly who they are. And so what inspired me to set up Ludo was having done the work in corporate and seen the absolute huge difference it made, not just to individuals, but also the profit line in the business. And I thought, we've got to do this everywhere. We've got to go out there to companies and really have this embedded into how we drive businesses so talent can thrive. And that's why I set up Ludo. And I do fractional HR, I do speaking, and we also have a modern EAP tech solution that supports in menopause, maternity, fertility, and health, including mental health. And that's to signpost and give resource to employees as and when they need it for life stuff. And let's be serious, work is life and life is work. And this idea they're separate is dead and gone. They are not. So how can we have truly people be in their best self, dealing with all the stuff we have in our personal self whilst at work?
So on a practical front, how does it help women in business sort of address their unique challenges? Because I'm sure it's not just, is it largely female focused when you talk about inclusivity?
Yeah, we started off very much in the beginning as being focused on female talent. That was my first mission when I set up Ludo, was transforming the whole world of maternity. But like any good startup, we've kind of grown and expanded into inclusion for all. And if you take fertility as an example, 49% of fertility challenges are with men. So, we look at it quite often as a female issue, and it really isn't, particularly when we look at what the modern family can look like these days. Of course, we want everybody to have opportunity to grow their family. So we primarily, yes, focused on women in the beginning, but now we drive inclusion for all. But separate to that, I would say I personally have a passion and a mission of truly driving equitable, safe spaces for women. That's partly because we still have women being marginalized. We still have a horrible gender pay gap. Women are still fighting to get to the top. I'm a mum of 3, so I've had my own journey in doing that. So there's more of a inner, I suppose, personal journey on that of how we support women to really thrive at work.
So obviously we talk about fertility, and you've got two groundbreaking modules, Ludo Maternity and Ludo Menopause. So how have they impacted? Is there examples that you could give of how they've impacted the companies in terms of inclusion and retention of their
Yeah, no, of
staff?
course. So our maternity module, taking that one first, we have an inbuilt wizard in it where when you tell your company you're pregnant, it asks you how often you'd like to be contacted, how often you think you'll be off for. This can all change, incidentally. People do change their mind, and that's fine. And we ask certain questions, which then allow that parent to feel empowered on their journey. And then based on their preferences, the tech will fire a reminder alert. So let's say you were off on maternity leave, you want to be contacted monthly. If I was your line manager, I'd get a message saying, "Dear Elizabeth," and HR would be copied. Jane is on maternity leave. She'd like to be contacted monthly. And I have a bit of a nudge to make sure we get in touch with you and keep in touch. And you on maternity leave can turn those features on, off, change them at any time. But it allows us to keep connection and communication if the expecting parent wants it. And we know this is one of the biggest downfalls in maternity, where frequently women go on maternity leave and nobody speaks to them for a year. And then they're due
Gosh, I
back and
hadn't
they
really
feel
thought
lost.
about that, Elizabeth. Because I've been self-employed my whole life, so I wasn't fortunate enough to have maternity. I think I had 10 weeks off with each of my three. But yeah, I hadn't really thought about that. It must be very low, like not just lonely because you're a new mum, but also the fact that all your colleagues are just getting on with their day to day. Because as you know, you live day to day and you're in the moment, and you could feel like you're just completely forgotten about.
It is. And it's a whole identity rearrangement of yourself. You're Elizabeth, the person at work who's got friends and does Pilates on a Tuesday and goes out with her mates. And then you're Elizabeth, the mother. And how you go back into the workplace with this new identity can be incredibly challenging. And so having the workplace keep in touch and you feel valued by them is really, really supportive and helps with the transition coming back into your job. And we've seen that, in answer to your question, how's it supported inclusion? We've seen it when we talk to those women about how they feel much more connected, valued, heard, relevant, because you can feel very irrelevant when you're at home with a baby and you're not performing in that workplace if that's part of what you have to drive your worth and your self-identity.
And so does the menopause modules work in a similar way, or?
No, with the menopause module, it's a resource, it's a signposting, it's help for women. And so, I mean, the Davina McCall show is a good one for this. We think that the answer to menopause is HRT, and her program is brilliant. And though, there are many other things you can be doing to support, such as strength training, nutrition, improving your sleep, your lifestyle choices. And so you might be thinking, gosh, am I in the menopause? Am I, and I'm in a place where I'm struggling? You come on to our menopause module and there's advice and resource and signposting on all these other things that you might not otherwise know about. And you can then go off and research those things more and get more information in that process. And what we've done is just signposted you off. You're going to go onto Google and look it up. You're going to speak to your doctor. You're going to speak to your mates. But we've helped you broaden that knowledge to be able to empower you in your own journey.
Yeah, it certainly creeps up on us all, doesn't it? I think I might have to be signposted. So let's just go back a few steps to your time at Tapestry. You were the global head of Wellbeing there. So what key lessons did you learn that you've taken forward into all your new ventures?
Our key lessons in terms of culture work, it's huge. I think we make mistakes frequently when we go into companies to work on how we drive well-being by putting in discounted gym membership or yoga on a Tuesday or whatever it might be. And actually, that's not enough. And sometimes it's very damaging when those things are introduced and then they are forgotten about and no one communicates it. One of the biggest learnings, and I talk about this when I work with companies and speaking companies, is how do we keep that communication going? And it's install the initiative, talk about it, review it, look at the KPIs and the uptake, and then talk about it again. And so it's this cadence of communicate feedback, which is why I stood up and talked about it at every town hall that I did when I was at Tapestry, is being able to keep the message going. Because unless you keep talking about it, people don't necessarily think that you're doing things for them that supports them. And the more you talk about it, the more you get uptake, the more you drive culture change, the more you drive inclusion in a different way. And it's a constant communication message, and you can't take your foot off the gas. And I think that's been one of my biggest learnings, particularly in a big global business like that.
So you've become known as the culture adjuster. Is that a name you've given to yourself, or is that something that has been pinned upon you?
I won an award, and they used those two words when they gave it to me, and they said Elizabeth is the culture adjuster, and it kind of stuck. And I like it. I feel like it represents who I am and the work that I do and how I work with companies to drive cultures that really work. And culture is driven at team level and at individual and at corporate level, at the whole company level. And so it isn't we're going to tackle the whole company all at once. Sometimes it can be a culture that's working really well in one team, and then there's a ripple effect that comes across the business. And it's knowing how to pick up on that, look at the success of that, and then use that to drive it across a wider business. And with culture, frequently people think it only comes from the top, but it comes from the top and the bottom and both direct everywhere. And it's just remembering that it isn't only led by the CEO.
No, and it sounds to me a lot of it, as you just said, a lot of it centers around communication and freedom to be able to articulate and talk to somebody in an open and honest way, and not feel like you're being judged. It's that sort of that comfort in communication, which I think is key. So communication obviously inherent to the culture in the workplace, but obviously we can use technology to make sort of environments more inclusive. So how do you do that, particularly in light of today's sort of more hybrid? We're both working from home today, where we're not with our team all the time. How does that work?
Yeah, I think there's lots of different ways you can do it, but I'm a big fan. Tech has its place, but I'm a big fan of connection days, or days where you bring the whole team together The hybrid thing with tech is also there, of we're going to use online resources to communicate. And though that in-person piece is really, really important. When it comes to tech, all the obvious ones like Zoom, Teams, these are all some of the obvious ones. But also having communities online. And I know some companies that do this really well, where it's kind of an inside Facebook type community where you can support ERGs, employee representative groups. You can support ways in which people can connect without it being the obvious, we're going to get on a Teams call, or, so creating communities is also a really strong way to drive cultural connection. Companies do things like charity days or charity initiatives, or a lot of this came out of COVID, where teams would all come together and say, right, we're going to run 100K, and everybody runs 2 or 3 or 5, and they add it all up. That's just one example, but there are many ways in which we can use online resources to drive connection. And for me, that's a big part of how we drive inclusion. But then when it comes to well-being, there are so many brilliant initiatives out there now of benefits we can offer to our own employees to help them on their well-being journey. If they want to take it up, it's up to them. But educating and supporting through access to online classes, health testing, nutrition advice. And then if those employees want to take it, then great. But we're having a huge growth in that area. And when you look at the younger generations coming through, it's expected. So companies that are turning a blind eye or ignoring that are going to get left behind, in my view.
So also then looking forward, what do you see? Are there any big trends that people in HR should be watching out for in terms of tech? And how do they get ready to embrace the future changes and what they could be doing right now?
Can we talk about AI? I think we're allowed to talk
I
about
totally
AI.
have to. Go on then.
Okay. I mean, when it comes to giving what was the shared service HR function, where you might have a group, talking about big companies now, but a resource of somebody on the end of the phone, there is some amazing stuff in AI now of this has happened, what do I do? And signposting to the legals, the policy, who to speak to. And I think that's going to be game changing just in terms of getting a speedy answer of where to signpost. We still need the people, but just that first step, I think that's been really, we're seeing a big shift in that. And AI is coming through in all sorts of, I mean, we could talk about that for ages. There's so many different AI moments, ways in which we can get help and resource. But again, it's a human connection. We've got to come back to the human connection. Human resources is exactly that. It's about the humans in a business. And so, yes, AI, and though, can we please pick up the phone and speak to each other sometimes? I'm a big believer in that. There's also some really interesting tech coming through on screening and recruitment and how we onboard people in a more inclusive way. And there's some great tech coming through on that. If you are neurodivergent, for example, the classic old school onboard process probably doesn't work for you. And even pre-onboard, how are we doing job descriptions that drive inclusion? How are we creating interview questions and accessibility moments for people who are coming for interview? So there's a lot of work going on in that space too, which for me is really exciting. That's just a couple that spring to mind.
Oh, Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you. So yeah, I'm really sort of G'd up now to talk to my staff today and get them motivated.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you so much. Now, if you'd like to book Elizabeth to speak at your next event and share her skills, her expertise around HR, leadership and tech, then obviously just call me on 01753 439 289, or you can always email Jane at greatbritishtalent.com. Thanks very much.